My name is Helen, and I'm 69 years old. For the past 3 years, I've been living with my son David and his wife Monica in their beautiful lakeside home. I thought I was helping them. I thought I was wanted. I was wrong about so many things, but I was right about one. That old leather suitcase in my closet was more valuable than anyone knew, and my daughter-in-law knew it too. Before I tell you what happened, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Like the walls have more say than you do? Drop a comment below and let me know, because this story is for everyone who's ever been made to feel like they don't matter anymore just because they've gotten older. And if you're new here, subscribe to this channel. You're going to want to hear how this ends. It started small, the way poison always does. Little comments here and there. Monica would walk past my room and sigh, loud enough for me to hear, but quiet enough to deny later. She'd open my closet door when putting away laundry and make these little noises of disgust. TSK, TSK, TSK. Like she'd discovered a rat's nest instead of my carefully organized belongings. One morning, about 6 months ago, I was sitting at the kitchen table drinking my coffee. Monica breezed in wearing her yoga outfit, the expensive kind with the little logo on the hip that costs more than my monthly Social Security check. She opened the fridge, pulled out her green smoothie, and said without even looking at me, "Your old stuff is cluttering our house, Helen." I looked up, startled. My old stuff? I kept everything in my room. I didn't leave things around. I was meticulous about not being a burden. "What stuff are you talking about, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to keep my voice pleasant. She turned then, leaning against the granite countertop that she'd insisted David install last year. "Everything, Helen. Your furniture, your boxes, that ancient suitcase taking up half the closet. We need the space. David and I are planning to convert that room into a home office eventually." My heart dropped into my stomach. That room was my room. The room David had said would always be mine. I looked down at my coffee, watching the cream swirl in circles. "I've tried to keep everything contained, Monica. I don't think I'm taking up that much space." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You don't think. That's the problem. You don't see how your presence affects our lives, our space, our marriage." That last word hung in the air like a threat. I wanted to ask what she meant, but David walked in at that moment, briefcase in hand, ready for work. He kissed Monica on the cheek, squeezed my shoulder, and asked if we were having a good morning. We both said yes. We both lied. After that morning, Monica's campaign intensified. She'd make comments about the suitcase specifically, the old leather one that sat on the top shelf of my closet. "That thing is so outdated, Helen. You could get a nice modern suitcase at Target for $30. Why hold on to that relic?" Because that relic held my history. Inside that suitcase was my mother's vintage jewelry collection, pieces she'd inherited from her mother and carefully preserved for me. There were delicate Art Deco earrings, a cameo brooch from the 1800s, a pearl necklace my father had given my mother on their 25th anniversary. There were also my father's military medals from his service in Korea, his dog tags, and the letters he'd written to my mother during his deployment. These weren't just things. They were my parents. They were proof that I came from somewhere, that I mattered to people who loved me before I became someone's burden. But I never told Monica what was inside. Some instinct, some small voice in my head, told me to keep that information to myself. Instead, I'd just smile and say, "It has sentimental value." She'd roll her eyes and walk away, but I could see the calculations behind those eyes. She was always calculating something. One afternoon, I was folding laundry in my room when Monica appeared in the doorway. She didn't knock. She never knocked anymore. "Helen, we need to talk about downsizing your belongings. David and I have been discussing it, and we really need you to get rid of at least half of what you have in here." I set down the towel I was folding. "Half? Monica, I barely have anything. I sold most of my furniture when I moved in. I gave away boxes of books and clothes. What's left is essentially what I need and a few treasured items." She stepped into the room, her eyes scanning the space like a realtor evaluating property. "That suitcase. Let's start there. What's even in it? Old clothes? Donate it. There are people who actually need things, you know." Something in her tone, the way she said it, made my spine straighten. "No," I said firmly. "That's not negotiable." Her eyebrows rose, and for a moment I saw something flash across her face. Anger? Curiosity? Greed? I couldn't quite name it, but it made me uncomfortable. Everything is negotiable when you're living in someone else's house, Helen. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. This was supposed to be my home too. David had promised me that when my arthritis got too bad to live alone, when my little apartment became too much to manage, I would always have a place with him. With them. That night at dinner, Monica brought it up again. David, your mother is being unreasonable about clearing out some of her old things. We've been more than patient, but she's refusing to cooperate. David looked between us, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. He had his father's eyes, kind and a little sad, always trying to make peace. Mom, is this about the suitcase again? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Monica jumped in before I could speak. It's about space, David. It's about living in a home that doesn't feel like a storage unit for someone else's past. We have our own future to think about. David sighed, and I could see him trying to navigate between his wife and his mother, a position I never wanted to put him in. Mom, would you consider at least going through it? Maybe there are some things you could part with? The betrayal I felt in that moment was sharp and unexpected. My own son, siding with her. I stood up from the table, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Excuse me, I said quietly. I've lost my appetite. I heard Monica's voice as I walked away. See, this is what I'm talking about. Drama over a suitcase. In my room, I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at that suitcase on the closet shelf. It wasn't even that large, maybe 2 feet by 3 feet, the leather worn soft from age and travel. My parents had taken it on their honeymoon to Niagara Falls in 1946. My mother had packed it for my first trip away from home, to summer camp when I was 12. I'd used it when I moved into my college dormitory, when I married David's father, when we brought baby David home from the hospital and needed to pack supplies for the trip. This suitcase had traveled through my entire life, and now it sat at the center of a battle I didn't want to fight. But I would fight it, because some things matter more than keeping peace, and this suitcase was one of them. The next morning, I had a doctor's appointment for my regular checkup. Monica was unusually cheerful at breakfast. Oh, you have that appointment today? I'd forgotten. David already left for work, so you'll need to drive yourself. You're still okay to drive, right? I'd been driving for 53 years without incident, but the way she said it made it sound like I was one step away from crashing into a mailbox. I'm fine, Monica. I'll be back in a couple of hours. She smiled, that bright fake smile she used when other people were watching. Take your time. Maybe do some shopping afterwards? Treat yourself? It was odd, her sudden encouragement for me to be gone longer, but I was too tired from our ongoing tension to analyze it. I gathered my purse and keys and headed out to my old sedan, the one David had helped me buy 5 years ago when my previous car finally died. The appointment went smoothly. Dr. Patterson said my blood pressure was good, my cholesterol was improving with the medication, and my arthritis was manageable with the current treatment plan. You're doing great, Helen, he said warmly. Keep doing whatever you're doing. If only he knew that what I was doing was slowly disappearing in my own son's house, erased one comment at a time by a woman who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle. But I smiled and thanked him and scheduled my next appointment for 6 months out, hoping I'd still have a place to call home by then. On the drive back, I decided to stop at the pharmacy to pick up a refill on my arthritis medication. It took longer than expected. There was a problem with the insurance, and the pharmacist needed to call the doctor's office for authorization. By the time I finally got back on the road, I'd been gone for nearly 3 hours instead of 2. As I drove down the long gravel road that led to David and Monica's property, I noticed Monica's white SUV parked near the lake. We owned about 5 acres, and the back portion included a small private lake that had been the selling point for David when they'd bought the property. He loved to fish. Monica rarely went down there, said the bugs bothered her and the sun would age her skin. So why was her car there now? Some instinct made me slow down. Instead of continuing to the house, I pulled off to the side of the road, partially hidden by a cluster of old oak trees. I told myself I was being paranoid, that there was a perfectly innocent explanation. Maybe she was taking a walk. Maybe she was on a phone call and wanted privacy. But my hands were shaking as I turned off the engine. I sat there for a moment, gathering my courage, then quietly opened my car door and stepped out. The afternoon sun was warm on my face, and I could hear birds singing in the trees. Everything seemed peaceful, normal, safe. I walked carefully through the trees, my sensible shoes crunching on dried leaves. As I got closer to the lake, I could see Monica more clearly. She was standing at the end of our small dock, and she was holding something. Something large and brown and familiar. My suitcase. My heart stopped. I ducked behind a large tree trunk, pressing my back against the bark. What was she doing with my suitcase? I watched, frozen, as Monica looked around, checking to make sure she was alone. She didn't see me hidden in the trees. She lifted the suitcase higher, and I could see the effort it took. It was heavy, weighted down with my parents' treasures, with my history, with everything that proved I was more than just an old woman taking up space. Monica swung the suitcase back once, twice, building momentum. On the third swing, she released it. I watched my past arc through the air in slow motion, the leather catching the sunlight for just a moment before it hit the water with a splash that sent ripples across the lake's surface. The suitcase floated for maybe 3 seconds, then began to sink. The water where we stood was deep, at least 15 feet near the dock. David had always warned about swimming there without supervision. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from crying out. I watched that suitcase disappear beneath the dark water, taking my mother's jewelry, my father's medals, my memories with it. Gone. Just gone. Thrown away like garbage by a woman who had no idea what she'd just destroyed. Or maybe she did. Maybe that was exactly the point. Monica stood on the dock for a moment, watching the water settle back into stillness. Then she pulled out her phone. Even from where I stood, maybe 50 feet away, I could hear her voice clearly across the water. She sounded pleased with herself. Done, she said into the phone. She'll think she misplaced it. We've been setting up the dementia excuse for weeks now. David's already half convinced she's losing it. My legs went weak. I grabbed the tree trunk to keep from falling. Dementia excuse? Setting it up. This wasn't spontaneous cruelty. This was planned, calculated, premeditated. Monica laughed, the sound carrying over the water like breaking glass. I know, right? The comments about her forgetting things, misplacing her keys, repeating stories. David's noticed. He mentioned assisted living last week, just casually, but he's thinking about it. Another few months of this, and he'll be filling out applications himself. Then we can finally have our house back. She paused, listening to whoever was on the other end. Her friend? Her mother? Someone who was complicit in this plan to erase me from my son's life. No, the suitcase was the last piece. That old junk she was so attached to. Now she has nothing. Nothing to tie her to the past, nothing to make her feel valuable. She'll be lost without it, and that's when we make our move. I slid down the tree trunk until I was sitting on the ground, my hands still over my mouth, tears streaming silently down my face. This wasn't just about space in a closet. This was psychological warfare. Monica had been systematically working to make me doubt myself, to make my son doubt me, to position me as a burden that needed to be removed. And the suitcase, my precious suitcase with my parents' treasures, was just collateral damage in her campaign. I don't know how long I sat there behind that tree. Long enough for Monica to walk back to her car, drive up to the house, and go inside. Long enough for the sun to shift positions and the shadows to lengthen. Long enough for my tears to dry and something else to replace them. Something harder. Something determined. Because here's what Monica didn't understand about old women. We've survived things she can't imagine. We've buried husbands and raised children and navigated decades of a world that constantly tried to convince us we didn't matter. We've learned to be quiet, to be pleasant, to make ourselves small. But quiet doesn't mean powerless. And small doesn't mean defeated. I stood up slowly, brushing the dirt and leaves off my pants. My knees protested, my back ached, but I straightened my spine and took a deep breath. Monica thought she'd won. She thought throwing away my past would break me. She had no idea she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. I walked back to my car, got in, and sat for a moment collecting my thoughts. Then I drove the rest of the way to the house, parked in my usual spot, and walked inside. Monica was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. She looked up with that bright, fake smile. "Oh, Helen, you're back. How was your appointment?" "It was fine," I said calmly. "Everything checked out well. The doctor says I'm in excellent health. Sharp as ever, actually." He was impressed with my memory recall during the cognitive screening.
I saw a flicker of something cross her face. Annoyance. Worry. "Good," she said, her smile tightening. "That's good." I walked past her toward my room, then paused at the doorway. "Oh, Monica. Have you seen my suitcase? The leather one from my closet. I can't seem to find it." Her performance was flawless. She turned with what looked like genuine concern. "Your suitcase. No, I haven't seen it. Are you sure you didn't move it somewhere?" "I'm quite sure," I said softly. It was on the top shelf of my closet this morning. Now it's gone. She set down her knife and wiped her hands on a towel. Helen, maybe you moved it and forgot. You've been forgetting quite a few things lately. Remember last week when you couldn't find your reading glasses and they were on your head the whole time? I forced myself to smile. You're right. I probably just misplaced it. I'll keep looking. But I didn't look. Instead, I went to my room, closed the door, and pulled out the small notebook I kept in my nightstand drawer. I started writing down everything I could remember. Every comment Monica had made about my memory. Every time she'd pointed out when I'd repeated a story or misplaced something. Every instance where she'd subtly undermined me in front of David. The pattern was clear once I saw it written down. She'd been building a case against my competence for months. That evening, David came home from work looking tired. Monica had dinner ready. Pot roast with potatoes and carrots, his favorite. We sat down together, and Monica played the perfect wife, asking about his day, laughing at his stories, pouring his wine. Then casually, as if it had just occurred to her, she said, "Honey, your mom can't find her suitcase. The one she keeps in her closet." David looked at me with concern. "Mom, did you lose your suitcase?" "I don't know, David. I can't find it, and I don't remember moving it. But maybe Monica's right. Maybe I did move it and forgot." It wouldn't be the first time lately, would it? I hated saying those words, hated feeding into Monica's narrative, but I needed to play this smart. If I accused her without proof, she'd just claim I was confused, paranoid, suffering from exactly the dementia she was trying to fake. I needed evidence. I needed help. And I knew exactly where to get it. David reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Don't worry, Mom. We'll find it. It's probably just in the garage or the basement. Things don't just disappear." Monica smiled at him, then at me. "Course they don't. But Helen, if you can't find it after a few days, maybe we should talk to your doctor about these memory issues. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. Lots of people your age experience cognitive decline." I nodded meekly, playing the part she expected. "You might be right. I'll make an appointment if it keeps happening." After dinner, I excused myself early, claiming fatigue. In my room, I pulled out my old address book and looked up a name I hadn't called in years. Frank Morrison. He'd been my husband's best friend, had served with him in Korea. After my husband died 10 years ago, Frank had stayed in touch, always checking on me, making sure I was okay. He'd retired from the police force 5 years ago, but before that, he'd spent 30 years as a detective, and the last 10 of those specializing in underwater recovery operations. I picked up my cell phone, the one David had insisted I get for emergencies, and dialed Frank's number. It rang 4 times, and I was about to give up when I heard his familiar gravelly voice. "Hello, Frank," I said quietly. "It's Helen. Helen Richardson. I need your help with something, and I need you to not ask too many questions until we're face to face." There was a pause, then, "Where are you? Are you safe?" Tears pricked my eyes at the genuine concern in his voice. "I'm safe for now. But I need a favor. I need you to help me retrieve something from the bottom of my son's lake. And I need it done quietly, at night, without anyone knowing." Another pause. Then, "What time tomorrow night and what am I looking for?" The next day crawled by with excruciating slowness. Monica made several more comments about my missing suitcase, each time in front of David, each time suggesting that perhaps my memory was failing. "I should call Dr. Patterson," she said over breakfast. "Just to be safe, Helen. These things can progress quickly if left unchecked." David nodded, worry creasing his forehead. "Mom, would you be willing to go in for some cognitive testing? Just to rule anything out?" I played my part perfectly. "If you think it's necessary, sweetheart. I just hope I'm not becoming a burden to you both." "Never a burden, Mom," David said firmly, and I could hear the love in his voice. But Monica's expression behind him told a different story. She couldn't wait to burden me right out of this house and into a facility somewhere far away. That afternoon, while Monica was out at her yoga class, I texted Frank with specific instructions. "Meet me at the lake entrance at midnight. Bring diving equipment. looking for a brown leather suitcase approximately 20 feet from the dock in 15 feet of water. Tell no one. His response was immediate. We'll be there. Stay safe. The hours until midnight felt like days. I lay in my bed fully clothed under the covers, listening to the house settle around me. I heard David and Monica go to bed around 10. I waited another hour, then another, until I was certain they were deeply asleep. Then I slipped out of bed, grabbed my jacket, and crept through the dark house like a thief in what was supposed to be my home. The night air was cold, and I wrapped my jacket tighter as I made my way down the path to the lake. I'd brought a small flashlight, but I kept it off, not wanting to risk anyone seeing the light from the house. The moon was half full, providing just enough illumination to see the path. When I reached the lake, I saw a figure standing near the dock. Frank. He stepped forward and wrapped me in a brief hug. Helen, what's going on? Why all the secrecy? I'll explain everything after we retrieve the suitcase, I said. Please, Frank. I just need to know if it's there, if she really did what I saw her do. His eyes narrowed. She. Who are we talking about? My daughter-in-law, I whispered. I saw her throw my suitcase into the lake yesterday afternoon. She doesn't know I witnessed it. She thinks I've lost it, that I'm losing my memory. She's been setting me up, Frank. Making my son think I'm developing dementia so they can put me in a home. His jaw clenched. That's elder abuse, Helen. That's a crime. I know, but I need proof. I need that suitcase. There's something inside that I didn't tell her about. Something that might explain why she really wanted it gone. Frank nodded once, all business now. Show me where you saw it go in. I pointed to the spot near the end of the dock. They're about 15 to 20 feet out. It sank within seconds, so it must have been heavy. Frank walked back to his truck and returned with professional diving equipment. I watched as he suited up with the efficiency of someone who'd done this thousands of times. He attached a waterproof flashlight to his vest and a small floating marker buoy to his belt. If I find it, I'll mark the location first, then bring it up. Wait here.
I stood on the shore, hugging myself against the cold, watching as Frank waded into the water and then disappeared beneath the surface. His flashlight created an eerie glow beneath the dark water, moving in systematic patterns as he searched. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. I started to worry that maybe the current had moved the suitcase, or it had sunk deeper than I thought, or I'd been wrong about the location. Then I saw the buoy pop up to the surface, bobbing in the water. Frank had found it. He surfaced moments later, and I could see he was pulling something behind him. My suitcase. He hauled it onto the shore, water streaming off the leather surface. Even wet and muddy, I recognized it immediately. My throat tightened with emotion. Frank removed his mask and looked at me. It was exactly where you said, weighted down with rocks someone had placed inside it to make sure it stayed down. This wasn't an accident, Helen. This was deliberate. I knelt beside the suitcase, my hands shaking as I reached for the clasps. They were rusted and stiff from the water, but Frank helped me pry them open. When we lifted the lid, my worst fears were confirmed. Inside, wrapped in plastic bags, were all my mother's jewelry pieces and my father's medals. Except they weren't my mother's jewelry pieces. I picked up the pearl necklace, the one my father had given my mother for their 25th anniversary. I'd held that necklace hundreds of times. I knew the weight of it, the slight imperfection on the third pearl from the clasp, the way the gold clasp had a tiny scratch from when my mother had caught it on her sweater. This necklace was too light. The pearls were too uniform. The clasp was pristine. These are fake, I whispered. Frank, these are all fake. He leaned closer, pulling out his phone to shine more light into the suitcase. I examined piece after piece. The Art Deco earrings that should have been platinum were cheap silver plate. The cameo brooch was plastic instead of carved shell. Even my father's medals had been replaced with replica versions you could buy online for $20. Someone replaced everything, I said, my voice barely audible. Monica. She must have been coming into my room when I was out, switching the real pieces with fakes over time. I never opened the suitcase. I just kept it closed, safe, or so I thought. She knew I wouldn't check, that I'd just trust they were there. Frank's expression was grim. This is theft, Helen. Grand larceny. If the original jewelry was as valuable as you say, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars. Maybe more. At least $50,000 worth, I said quietly. My mother's jewelry collection was extensive. She'd been an only child, inherited pieces from both sides of her family. Some of those pieces dated back to the 1800s. And now they're gone, sold by a woman who convinced my son that I'm the problem. Frank stood up and pulled out his phone. I'm calling this in. This is a police matter now. I grabbed his arm. Wait. If we do this now, tonight, Monica will have time to cover her tracks. She's smart, Frank. She's been planning this for months. I need to do this differently. He looked skeptical. What did you have in mind? I need you to keep the suitcase as evidence, secured somewhere she can't get to it. Then I need a few days to do some detective work of my own. If she sold my mother's jewelry, there will be records. Pawn shops, jewelry buyers, estate sale companies. They all keep transaction records. And how are you going to access those records? Frank asked. I smiled for the first time in days. Because you're going to help me. You still have contacts in the police force, don't you? People who owe you favors? He studied my face for a long moment, then slowly nodded. I know a few people. But Helen, if we're going to do this, we do it right. Full investigation by the book. I'm not risking evidence being thrown out on a technicality because we cut corners. Agreed, I said. But we keep this between us until we have everything we need. Monica can't know what's coming. We loaded the suitcase into Frank's truck, and he promised to store it in a secure location. Before he left, he pulled a small business card from his wallet. This is a private investigator I worked with for years. Former police, completely trustworthy. Call her tomorrow. Tell her I referred you. She specializes in financial crimes, and if your daughter-in-law sold those jewelry pieces, she'll find the trail. I took the card, reading the name in the moonlight. Sarah Chun, Private Investigations. Thank you, Frank, for believing me, for helping me. He squeezed my shoulder. Your husband was my best friend. He'd never forgive me if I let someone hurt you and did nothing about it. Call me tomorrow after you talk to Sarah. We'll coordinate from there. I watched his truck disappear down the road, then made my way back to the house. The walk back felt different than the walk down. I'd gone to the lake as a victim, helpless and erased. I was returning as something else. A woman with a plan. A woman who wasn't going to disappear quietly. Back in my room, I changed into my nightgown and slipped under the covers. My heart was racing, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was from something I hadn't felt in months. Purpose. For the first time since moving into this house, I felt like myself again. Not some confused old woman losing her grip on reality. Not a burden to be managed and eventually discarded. Just Helen. Helen Richardson, daughter of William and Margaret Thompson, wife of the late James Richardson, mother of David Richardson. A woman with a history that mattered, a story that wasn't finished yet. The next morning at breakfast, I played my part perfectly. I looked troubled, confused, running my hand through my hair in a gesture of frustration. I still can't find that suitcase, I said to no one in particular. It's driving me crazy. Where could it have gone? Monica looked up from her yogurt and granola, her expression a perfect mask of concern. Helen, maybe it's time to accept that you might have gotten rid of it yourself and forgotten. Or perhaps someone took it, thinking it was trash. Either way, it's just stuff. Things aren't important. Your health is important, and these memory lapses are concerning. David looked between us, his worry evident. Mom, I made you an appointment with Dr. Patterson for next week. Just to check in about the memory issues. Is that okay? Of course, sweetheart, I said, patting his hand. Whatever you think is best. I don't want to be difficult. You're not being difficult, David said firmly. We just want to make sure you're okay. After David left for work, I went back to my room and called the number on Sarah Chen's business card. She answered on the second ring with a crisp, professional tone. Chen Investigations. Ms. Chen, my name is Helen Richardson. Frank Morrison referred me to you. I need help investigating a theft. There was a brief pause, then her voice warmed slightly. Any friend of Frank's is a priority. Tell me what's going on. I spent the next 20 minutes explaining everything. The missing jewelry, Monica's campaign to make me seem incompetent, the suitcase in the lake, the fake pieces. Sarah listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of acknowledgement. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Mrs. Richardson, she finally said, what you're describing is elder financial abuse combined with possible fraud and theft. These are serious charges, and if we can prove them, your daughter-in-law could face significant legal consequences. Are you prepared for how this might affect your relationship with your son? The question stopped me cold. I hadn't allowed myself to think that far ahead. David loved Monica. He'd married her 5 years ago, been devoted to her, built a life with her. If I exposed her crimes, would he hate me for it? Would he choose her over me? Would I lose my son in the process of proving I wasn't losing my mind? I thought about it for a long moment, then said quietly, I'd rather have my son hate me and know the truth than have him put me away in a facility because he believes I'm mentally incompetent. At least if he knows the truth, he can make an informed choice. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. Okay, here's what I need you to do. First, make a list of every piece of jewelry and every metal that was in that suitcase. Be as detailed as possible. Descriptions, any unique identifying marks, approximate values if you know them. Second, try to remember when you last physically handled each piece. This will help us establish a timeline for when the replacements were made. Third, go through your phone and email. Look for any correspondence with jewelry appraisers, insurance companies, anything that might have photos or documentation of the original pieces. I can do all of that, I said. My mother had the jewelry collection appraised about 15 years ago, before she passed. I should still have those documents in my safety deposit box at the bank. Perfect, Sarah said. Get me copies of those appraisals. They'll be crucial evidence. Meanwhile, I'll start checking with local pawn shops, estate buyers, and online marketplaces. If your daughter-in-law sold these pieces, she left a trail. People always do. How long will this take? I asked. If she's been selling over the past few months, I should be able to find something within a week, maybe less. These kinds of transactions require identification. She can't have sold $50,000 worth of jewelry without leaving paperwork behind. After hanging up with Sarah, I spent the rest of the morning working on the list she'd requested. I wrote down every piece I could remember. My mother's platinum engagement ring with 3 small diamonds. Her gold charm bracelet with 12 charms collected over 40 years. The Art Deco earrings with genuine aquamarine stones. The cameo brooch carved from genuine shell, not plastic. The pearl necklace with the imperfect third pearl. My grandmother's garnet ring. My great-grandmother's jet mourning jewelry from the Victorian era. For my father's items, I listed his bronze star medal, his Purple Heart, his Korean Service Medal with 3 bronze stars, his dog tags, and the silver star he'd been awarded for gallantry in action. Each item I wrote down brought back memories. My mother wearing the pearls to my wedding. My father's chest swelling with pride when he wore his medals to the Veterans Day parade. These weren't just valuable objects. They were my family, preserved in metal and stone. By the time I finished the list, it was 3 pages long. I also included detailed descriptions of any unique characteristics. The tiny scratch on the pearl clasp. The inscription inside my grandmother's garnet ring that read, "All my love, William." The slight bend in one of my father's dog tags from when they'd been through combat. Details that would be impossible to replicate in cheap fakes. That afternoon, Monica suggested we go shopping together. Just us girls, she said with that bright, fake smile. We could get lunch, maybe look at some clothes. What do you say, Helen? I knew what she was doing. Another opportunity to point out my supposed memory problems in public, to build her case with witnesses. But I agreed, because I wanted to watch her. I wanted to see how she operated now that I knew what she really was. We drove to the mall in her expensive SUV, and Monica kept up a steady stream of cheerful chatter. She talked about a new restaurant she wanted to try, about the yoga retreat she was planning for next month, about how David had been working too hard lately. Normal conversation, except I could now hear the subtext beneath every word. The restaurant was expensive, funded by money that might have come from my mother's stolen jewelry. The yoga retreat was a luxury she felt entitled to, regardless of the cost. David working too hard was probably because Monica's spending required him to take on extra projects. At the mall, we went to a department store, and Monica immediately headed for the jewelry counter. "Oh, let's just look," she said, her eyes already scanning the display cases. "I love beautiful things, don't you, Helen?" I stood beside her, watching as she pointed to different pieces, asking the saleswoman to let her try them on. A diamond tennis bracelet, a pair of emerald earrings, a sapphire pendant, all expensive, all pieces she admired with a covetous gleam in her eyes. The saleswoman was friendly and patient, clearly hoping for a sale. "These emerald earrings would look stunning on you," she told Monica. "They're part of our estate collection, genuine vintage pieces from the 1940s. I felt my heart skip. Estate collection. That meant they bought from individuals selling family heirlooms. I moved closer, pretending to admire the earrings while actually studying the saleswoman's name tag. Deborah. I filed it away for later. Monica tried on the emerald earrings, turning her head back and forth to catch the light. Beautiful, she murmured. David would love these on me. After we left the jewelry counter, Monica dragged me through several clothing stores. At each one, she'd make little comments designed to undermine me. Helen, do you remember we came here last week? You picked out that same blue sweater again. Or, Helen, you just told me that story about David's first day of school. You told me the same story yesterday. Each comment was delivered with concern, loud enough for nearby shoppers to hear. Each one was carefully crafted to paint a picture of a confused old woman losing her grip on reality. I played along, acting embarrassed, apologizing for my forgetfulness, while internally cataloging every manipulation. At lunch, Monica ordered us salads and spent the meal talking about her future plans. She and David wanted to travel more, she said. Maybe Europe next year. But it's hard with you living with us, Helen. We feel like we can't leave you alone for that long. Have you ever thought about assisted living communities? Some of them are really nice. Like resorts, almost. I took a small bite of my salad, chewing slowly to buy time before responding. I've thought about it, I admitted, which was true. I had thought about it, but not for the reasons she assumed. Sometimes I worry I'm becoming too much of a burden on you both. Monica's face lit up with what looked like genuine relief. Oh, Helen, you understand. I'm so glad we can talk about this openly. It's not that we don't love you, but David and I are still young. We have our own lives to live. And you'd probably be happier around people your own age, with activities designed for seniors. No pressure to keep up with our busy schedule. Our busy schedule, I repeated. Yes, I can see how my presence must really interfere with your yoga classes and shopping trips. The sarcasm went completely over her head. Exactly, she said, missing the bite in my tone. You get it. We finished lunch and Monica drove us home. As we pulled into the driveway, I saw Frank's truck parked down the road, partially hidden by trees. He'd texted me earlier that he and Sarah wanted to do a drive-by to get familiar with the property layout. Seeing his truck there, knowing I had allies working on my behalf, gave me a surge of strength. That evening, David came home with flowers for Monica and a hug for me. He seemed lighter, happier, and I realized Monica had probably texted him about our productive conversation regarding assisted living. He thought progress was being made, that his difficult mother was finally seeing reason. It broke my heart. Over dinner, Monica recounted our day, putting her own spin on events. Helen and I had such a nice time together. We talked about a lot of things, including some options for her future living arrangements. I think she's really open to exploring some wonderful senior communities in the area. David looked at me with hope and relief. Really, Mom? You'd be willing to look at some places? I nodded slowly. I think it might be wise to explore all options. I want what's best for everyone. Monica beamed. See, your mother is being so reasonable. I think this is a sign she's accepting reality. What reality is that? I asked quietly. That you need more support than we can provide here, Monica said smoothly. That your needs are changing as you age. That it's okay to admit you need help. My needs, I repeated. Yes, I suppose everyone's needs change over time. Some people need space. Some people need money. Some people need to feel important, even if it means destroying someone else to get there. The room went quiet. David looked confused. Mom, what are you talking about? I stood up from the table, my chair scraping against the floor. Nothing, sweetheart. I'm just tired. I think I'll go to bed early. In my room, I checked my phone and found a text from Sarah. Found something. Call me when you're alone. My hands shook as I dialed her number. She answered immediately. Mrs. Richardson, I found a transaction record from a high-end estate jewelry buyer downtown. 3 weeks ago, a woman matching your daughter-in-law's description sold a pearl necklace, a cameo brooch, and a pair of Art Deco earrings. Total payout was $12,000. The buyer required identification for the transaction. It's definitely her. $12,000, I breathed. 3 weeks ago. What else? Sarah's voice was crisp and efficient. I found 2 more transactions. One at a different estate buyer 2 months ago. Another at an online precious metals dealer for the metals 6 weeks ago. Altogether, I'm tracking about $37,000 in sales so far. I'm still checking other potential buyers, but Mrs. Richardson, we have her. The documentation is solid. What do we do now? I asked. Now we go to the police with Frank, Sarah said. We file a formal complaint. We present the evidence. They'll investigate, and if they find probable cause, they'll arrest her. But I need to ask you again, are you ready for this? Once we start this process, there's no going back. I thought about David, about the pain this would cause him. I thought about my missing jewelry, about my father's metals being sold like common scrap metal. I thought about Monica's plan to have me declared incompetent and locked away in a facility. I thought about all the other elderly people who faced the same treatment, who had no one to fight for them, who disappeared quietly into the system because no one believed them. I'm ready, I said firmly. Let's do this. The next morning, I left the house early, telling Monica I was going to the bank to check on some financial matters. She barely looked up from her coffee, probably thrilled that I was out of the house. I drove to the police station, where Frank was waiting for me in the parking lot. Sarah pulled up moments later in a sleek black sedan. Inside, we met with Detective James Walsh, head of the Financial Crimes Unit. Frank had worked with him for years and trusted him completely. Detective Walsh was in his mid-40s, with kind eyes and the patient demeanor of someone who'd heard thousands of difficult stories. I sat in his office and told him everything while Sarah laid out the documentation she'd gathered. The appraisal records of the original jewelry. The transaction receipts from the estate buyers. Security camera footage Sarah had obtained showing Monica entering and exiting the shops. The fake jewelry pieces Frank had recovered from the lake. My detailed timeline of Monica's psychological manipulation campaign. Detective Walsh listened carefully, taking notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and exhaled slowly. Mrs. Richardson, this is one of the most thorough cases of documented elder abuse I've seen brought to me. Most victims don't have the presence of mind or resources to gather this kind of evidence. You've done excellent work. So you'll investigate? I asked. We're already investigating, he said. Based on what you've shown me, I'm going to request an arrest warrant. The evidence is substantial. Theft over $10,000, elder abuse, fraud. These are serious felony charges. My stomach twisted. When? Probably within the next 48 hours. I need to present this to the district attorney, get the warrant issued, and then we'll execute it. Mrs. Richardson, I want you to prepare yourself. This is going to be traumatic for your family, especially your son. Do you have somewhere you can stay after the arrest? Somewhere safe. I can stay with me, Frank said immediately. I have a guest room. You'll be comfortable and safe. I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. This was really happening. After months of feeling invisible and powerless, the system was finally listening to me. Finally believing me. Detective Walsh stood and extended his hand. Go home. Act normal. Don't give any indication that you know what's coming. Can you do that? I've been acting for months, I said quietly. I can manage 2 more days. Frank drove me back to my car, and Sarah gave me her number with instructions to call anytime, day or night, if I felt unsafe. Then I drove home, back to the house where my daughter-in-law was probably already planning which assisted living facility to dump me in. When I walked in, Monica was on the phone in the living room. She looked up, startled, and quickly ended her call. Oh, Helen, you're back. How was the bank? Fine, I said. Just checking on some accounts. Her eyes narrowed slightly. What accounts? I thought David managed all your finances. He manages most of them, I replied carefully. But I still have my own accounts from before. Just wanted to make sure everything was in order. I could see the wheels turning in her head, wondering if I'd discovered missing money, if she'd been caught. But she recovered quickly, her smile sliding back into place. Of course. It's good to stay on top of these things. Although, if you ever need help managing your finances, David and I are happy to assist. I'm sure you are, I said. Thank you for the offer. The next 2 days were the longest of my life. I moved through the house like a ghost, eating meals with David and Monica, nodding along to their conversations, playing the role of the confused, compliant elderly mother. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed with updates from Detective Walsh. Warrant approved. Arrest scheduled for tomorrow morning. Officers will arrive at 8 a.m. That final night, I lay in bed unable to sleep. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, Monica would be arrested. Tomorrow, David would have to face the truth about the woman he'd married. Tomorrow, our family would shatter into pieces, and I didn't know if we'd ever be able to put it back together. But I also thought about my mother's jewelry, sold and scattered to strangers. I thought about my father's metals, melted down for their metal content. I thought about how Monica had looked at me, through me, like I was nothing more than an obstacle to be removed. I thought about all the elderly people suffering in silence, too afraid or too worn down to fight back. No, tomorrow wasn't about breaking apart. Tomorrow was about truth. And truth, no matter how painful, was always better than living a lie. I got out of bed and packed a small bag with essentials. Frank would pick me up right after the arrest. I wouldn't be staying here, not for a while. Maybe not ever. I left a note for David on my nightstand, telling him I loved him, that I was sorry for the pain this would cause, that everything I'd done was to protect both of us from someone who'd proven herself capable of terrible things. At 7:45 the next morning, I sat in my room fully dressed, listening to the sounds of the house waking up. David's alarm. The shower running. Monica in the kitchen starting coffee. Normal sounds. The last normal sounds this house would know for a while. At exactly 8 a.m., I heard the doorbell ring. Then voices. Official voices identifying themselves as police officers. Then Monica's voice, confused, irritated. What is this about? Then David's voice, alarmed, protective. What's going on? Is this about my mother? I forced myself to walk out of my room, to face what came next. In the living room, 4 police officers stood near the door. Detective Walsh was with them. Monica stood between David and the officers, her face pale, her eyes wide with what looked like genuine shock. Monica Patterson, Detective Walsh said formally, "You're under arrest for theft, elder abuse, and fraud. You have the right to remain silent." What? Monica's voice was shrill. This is insane. David, tell them this is insane. David looked completely lost, his eyes darting between Monica and the officers. There must be some mistake. My wife hasn't done anything wrong. Detective Walsh gestured to me. Mrs. Richardson, would you please confirm that this is the woman who has been living in this house with you for the past 3 years? Yes, I said quietly. That's Monica. Monica's head whipped toward me, and for the first time, I saw her mask slip completely. Her eyes were filled with hatred, pure and undisguised. You, she hissed. You did this. You bitter, jealous old woman. You can't stand that David chose me over you. Detective Walsh continued reading Monica her rights, while 2 officers moved forward with handcuffs. David stumbled backward, his face stricken. Mom, what is happening? What is she being arrested for? For stealing my mother's jewelry collection and your father's military medals, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. For selling them and replacing them with fakes. For throwing the suitcase in the lake to hide the evidence. For systematically trying to convince you that I was mentally incompetent so you'd put me in a facility and she could have this house to herself. You're lying, Monica screamed as the officers cuffed her hands behind her back. She's lying, David. She's a crazy old woman making up stories because she's jealous of us. David looked at Detective Walsh, desperate for this to make sense. Is this true? Do you have evidence? Substantial evidence, Detective Walsh said. Transaction records showing your wife sold approximately $37,000 worth of jewelry and metals over the past 3 months. Security footage of her making these sales. The recovered suitcase with fake replacements. Witness testimony of her throwing the suitcase in your lake. It's all documented, Mr. Richardson. David's legs seemed to give out. He sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. This can't be real, he whispered. This can't be happening. Monica was still screaming as the officers led her toward the door. I needed that money. Do you know what it's like trying to maintain a lifestyle on your pathetic salary? Your mother had all those things just sitting there, not using them, not appreciating them. She's old. What does she need jewelry for? What does she need medals for? They were wasted on her. The officers guided her out the door, her voice still carrying back into the house. You'll regret this, Helen. You'll die alone in some facility, forgotten by everyone, and I'll be out in no time. You'll see. You'll see. Then she was gone, loaded into a police car, and the house fell silent except for the sound of David crying. I stood frozen, unsure whether to go to him or give him space. Detective Walsh made the decision for me. Mr. Richardson, he said gently, I know this is overwhelming. Your mother has been through a significant trauma. She's going to need your support in the coming weeks. I'd suggest family counseling once you're both ready. For now, take some time to process this. We'll be in touch about the court proceedings. After the police left, I slowly walked over and sat on the couch beside David. He didn't look at me, just kept his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. I'm so sorry, I whispered. I never wanted to hurt you. Did she really do all that? His voice was muffled, broken. Did she really steal from you, and try to make me think you were losing your mind? Yes, I said softly. I saw her throw the suitcase in the lake. I heard her on the phone talking about how she'd been setting up a dementia excuse for months. I have proof, David. I wouldn't have done this without absolute proof. He finally looked at me, and the pain in his eyes was devastating. I almost put you in a home. I was filling out applications. I was researching facilities. I believed her over you. Tears streamed down my face. She was very convincing. She'd been planning it for a long time. You're not to blame for believing the woman you loved. He shook his head. But you're my mother. I should have known. I should have seen what she was doing. We sat there together, two people who'd been manipulated and betrayed by someone they'd trusted. Eventually, David spoke again. What happened to the jewelry? The real pieces? Sold, I said. Most of them anyway. The investigator traced them to various estate buyers. They're gone, scattered to different collections now. Your father's metals were sold to a precious metals dealer. They're probably melted down by now. David made a sound like he'd been punched. My father's metals. She sold my father's metals. I put my hand on his shoulder. I know. I'm sorry. He turned to me suddenly, pulling me into a tight hug. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry I didn't protect you. I'm sorry I didn't listen. I'm sorry I let her treat you that way. We held each other and cried for everything we'd lost. Not just the jewelry and metals, though those hurt, but for the trust that had been broken, for the 3 years I'd spent feeling like an unwanted guest in my son's home, for the marriage David had built on lies. A car horn honked outside, and I pulled away reluctantly. That's Frank. He's taking me to stay with him for a few days. Just until things settle down. David nodded, wiping his eyes. Probably a good idea. This house feels poison right now. I stood and picked up my small bag. David, whatever happens next with Monica, with the trial, with everything, I want you to know I love you. I did this to protect us both, not to hurt you. I know, Mom, he said. And I love you too. I'm going to make this right somehow. I don't know how yet, but I will. Frank drove me to his house, a comfortable ranch in a quiet neighborhood. He showed me the guest room, made sure I had everything I needed, then left me alone to rest. But I couldn't rest. My mind was spinning with everything that had happened, everything that would happen next. That afternoon, Sarah called with an update. Monica had been arraigned and bail was set at $50,000. Her parents posted it, so she's out for now, but she has a tracking ankle monitor and strict instructions to stay away from you and your son. The preliminary hearing is scheduled for 2 weeks from now. And after that, I asked, if the judge finds probable cause, which they will based on our evidence, it goes to trial. That could take several months. But Mrs. Richardson, I want to be honest with you. With the evidence we have, the prosecution is confident they can get a conviction. Your daughter-in-law is facing serious time. How much time? Sarah paused. For theft over $10,000, elder abuse and fraud? Probably 5 to 10 years if she's convicted on all charges. Maybe more if the judge wants to make an example. I sat down heavily on Frank's couch. 10 years. Monica would be in prison for 10 years. David would be divorcing his wife and watching her go to jail. Our family would be torn apart, put on display in a courtroom for everyone to judge. Mrs. Richardson, are you okay? Sarah's voice was concerned. I don't know, I admitted. I know she deserves to be punished. I know what she did was wrong. But I also know this is going to destroy my son. Your son is stronger than you think, Sarah said gently. And he deserves to know the truth. He deserves to build his life on reality, not on lies. You gave him that gift, even though it hurt. After we hung up, I sat in Frank's living room and thought about my parents. My mother with her carefully curated jewelry collection, each piece chosen with love, worn with pride, passed down with the expectation that it would be treasured. My father with his medals, earned through sacrifice and courage, kept as reminders of service and duty. They'd raised me to be strong, to stand up for what was right even when it was difficult. I'd honored them by fighting back, by refusing to disappear quietly, by proving that old women still matter, still have value, still deserve justice. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange limbo. David called every day, sometimes just to talk, sometimes to apologize again, sometimes to ask questions about what happened. He was seeing a therapist, he told me, trying to process the betrayal, the manipulation, the fact that he'd been living with someone capable of such calculated cruelty. Monica, according to Detective Walsh, was maintaining her innocence and planning to claim that she had permission to sell the jewelry, that I'd given her authorization, and then forgot due to dementia. Her lawyer was going to argue that I was a confused old woman targeting her daughter-in-law out of jealousy and spite. Good luck with that strategy, Sarah said dryly when she told me. We have too much evidence proving premeditation and deception. The recorded phone call you overhead at the lake. The systematic replacement of real items with fakes over months. The fact that she threw the suitcase in the lake and lied about it. No jury will buy the dementia defense. The day of the preliminary hearing arrived. David picked me up from Frank's house, and we drove to the courthouse together. Neither of us spoke much. What was there to say? We were about to sit in a courtroom and watch David's wife be formally charged with crimes against his mother. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, formal and cold. Monica sat at the defense table with her lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman who looked expensive. Monica had clearly used some of the stolen money to hire good representation. She didn't look at us when we came in, just kept her eyes forward, her jaw tight. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Morrison, called the hearing to order. The prosecutor, a young man named Marcus Chun, presented the evidence. He showed the appraisal documents for the original jewelry. He showed the transaction records from the estate buyers. He played security footage of Monica selling the pieces. He presented testimony from Frank about retrieving the suitcase with the fake replacements. Monica's lawyer tried to argue that this was all circumstantial, that there was no proof her client had stolen anything, that the jewelry could have been sold with permission years ago and replaced with replicas for sentimental reasons. But her arguments sounded weak even to my inexperienced ears. Then the prosecutor did something I hadn't expected. He called me to testify. I walked to the witness stand on shaking legs and was sworn in. Marcus Chin approached with a kind expression. "Mrs. Richardson," he said, "can you tell the court about the day you witnessed the defendant dispose of your suitcase?" I took a deep breath and told the story. How I'd come home early from my appointment. How I'd seen Monica's car at the lake. How I'd hidden in the trees and watched her throw my suitcase into the water. How I'd heard her phone conversation about setting up a dementia excuse. When I finished, Monica's lawyer stood for cross-examination. "Mrs. Richardson," she said sharply, "you claim you heard my client on the phone discussing a plan to make you seem incompetent. Yet you never told your son about this conversation. You never called the police that day. Why not?" "Because I knew no one would believe me without proof," I said quietly. Monica had been very careful to paint me as confused and unreliable. If I'd made accusations without evidence, it would have just reinforced her narrative that I was suffering from dementia. Or, the lawyer suggested, perhaps this conversation never happened. Perhaps you've constructed this story to justify your anger toward a daughter-in-law you never liked. I looked directly at Monica then, and she finally met my eyes. I saw defiance there, but also fear. "She knows I'm telling the truth," I said. "Look at her face. She knows exactly what she did." Judge Morrison banged her gavel. "The witness will answer the questions asked and refrain from speculation." But the damage was done. The courtroom had seen Monica's expression, the flash of guilt before she composed herself. The judge took less than 10 minutes to make her decision. "Based on the evidence presented, I find probable cause to proceed to trial on all charges. The defendant will remain on house arrest with monitoring until trial. Court is adjourned." Outside the courthouse, David stood beside me as reporters shouted questions. We'd become a local news story, the elderly woman fighting back against her abusive daughter-in-law. I hated the attention, but Sarah had warned me this was coming. Cases like this always generated media interest. David drove me back to Frank's house in silence. When we pulled up, he turned off the engine but didn't move to get out. "Mom," he said, "I want you to come home. Not to my house. I mean our house. I'm selling it. Too many bad memories. But I want us to find a place together. A fresh start. Somewhere that's truly yours as much as mine." Tears filled my eyes. "David, you don't have to do that. I want to," he insisted. "I should have done it years ago. I should have made sure you felt like it was your home, not just a place you were allowed to stay. I failed you, Mom, but I won't make that mistake again." We hugged there in Frank's driveway, two people trying to rebuild trust that had been damaged by someone else's cruelty. It would take time. There would be hard days ahead, court dates and testimony, and facing Monica's accusations. But we would face it together. The trial began 3 months later. By then, David had filed for divorce, put the lakeside house on the market, and moved into a temporary apartment. He'd also been working with Sarah and Detective Walsh to recover what jewelry pieces they could locate. A few items had been found and purchased back from the estate buyers. My mother's garnet ring. One pair of Art Deco earrings. Not much, but something. The metals were gone forever, melted down before we could trace them. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Monica's defense strategy was exactly what Sarah had predicted. They claimed I'd given permission for the sales and then forgotten due to cognitive decline. They presented no evidence to support this, because no evidence existed. The prosecution, meanwhile, presented mountains of documentation, testimony from multiple witnesses, and the damning security footage. The most powerful moment came when the prosecutor played the recording Frank had made of Monica's phone conversation at the lake. Technology had advanced enough that he'd been able to capture it on his phone from where he was positioned in the woods during one of our later evidence-gathering trips. We'd gone back, recreated the scene, and recorded Monica making similar incriminating statements to a friend, not knowing she was being monitored as part of the investigation. The jury heard Monica's voice, clear and cold, talking about how she needed to get rid of the old woman's junk, how she'd been slowly replacing valuable pieces with fakes, how David was too stupid to notice what was happening right under his nose. The courtroom was silent as her words played out, each sentence another nail in her defense's coffin. When it came time for victim impact statements, I stood before the court and spoke from my heart. What Monica took from me wasn't just jewelry or medals, I said. She took my sense of safety in my own son's home. She took my confidence in my own mind. She tried to take my relationship with my son by convincing him I was incompetent. She tried to take my freedom by pushing for me to be institutionalized. The monetary value of what she stole is significant, but the emotional and psychological damage is immeasurable. I will never feel completely safe again. I will always wonder if people believe me when I speak. She didn't just steal objects. She tried to steal me, my identity, my worth as a human being. That is the real crime here. I saw several jurors wiping their eyes as I sat down. David squeezed my hand, and I squeezed back. Whatever happened next, we'd survive this together. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood and read the verdict. On the count of theft in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of elder abuse, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of fraud, we find the defendant guilty. Monica's face crumpled. She turned to look at David, perhaps hoping for some sign of support, but he looked away. She'd burned that bridge beyond repair. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Judge Morrison had clearly been moved by the case. She addressed Monica directly before pronouncing sentence. Mrs. Patterson, you targeted a vulnerable elderly woman who trusted you. You systematically stole from her, manipulated her, and attempted to have her declared incompetent for your own financial gain. You showed no remorse, no empathy, no recognition of the harm you caused. This court must send a clear message that elder abuse will not be tolerated. I hereby sentence you to 8 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 5 years. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution to Mrs. Richardson for the value of the stolen items, plus damages for emotional distress. This court is adjourned. Monica was led away in handcuffs, and I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but at what cost? David had lost his wife, his home, his sense of security. I had proven I wasn't incompetent, but I'd also lost irreplaceable family heirlooms. We'd won the legal battle, but the emotional scars would take much longer to heal. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded us again. David stepped forward and read a brief statement he'd prepared. My mother is a survivor. She refused to be silenced or erased. She fought back with courage and dignity. I'm proud of her, and I'm ashamed that I didn't see what was happening sooner. To anyone else experiencing elder abuse, please know that you're not alone. Speak up. Fight back. There are people who will believe you and help you. Don't let anyone convince you that your voice doesn't matter. The reporters shouted more questions, but we walked away, David's arm around my shoulders. Frank and Sarah were waiting by the car, both smiling. You did it, Sarah said, hugging me. You got justice. We got justice, I corrected. I couldn't have done this without all of you. That evening, David and I had dinner at a quiet restaurant, just the two of us. Over pasta and wine, we talked about the future. David had found a beautiful house in a neighborhood I'd always loved, a ranch with a main floor bedroom for me and plenty of space for both of us. It has a garden, he said. I thought you might like to plant some flowers. Make it feel like home. I'd like that, I said. A fresh start. For both of us. He reached across the table and took my hand. I'm going to do better, Mom. I'm going to be the son you deserve. The son Dad would have wanted me to be. You already are, I said. You made a mistake trusting the wrong person. But when you learned the truth, you stood by me. You believed me. That's all I ever wanted. As we finished dinner, I thought about the long journey that had led to this moment. The fear, the gaslighting, the moment I'd watched my suitcase sink into the lake. The decision to fight back instead of accepting defeat. The investigation, the arrest, the trial. The conviction and sentencing. The justice finally served. But more than the legal victory, I thought about what I'd learned. That being old doesn't mean being powerless. That standing up for yourself is always worth it, even when it's hard. That family is built on trust and honesty, not blood and obligation. That some things are worth fighting for, even if it costs you everything. My mother's jewelry was mostly gone, scattered to collectors who would never know its history. My father's medals were melted down, their service and sacrifice reduced to raw metal. But I was still here, still standing, still fighting, still proving that old women matter, that our voices deserve to be heard, that we are never too old to demand justice. David and I walked out of the restaurant into the cool evening air. He offered me his arm, and I took it, letting my son guide me to the car. We drove to his apartment, where I'd been staying for the past few weeks, and he walked me to the door. Get some rest, Mom, he said, kissing my cheek. Tomorrow we'll go look at that house I told you about. Start planning our fresh start. Inside, I changed into my nightgown and sat on the edge of the bed. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. The restitution check from Monica's parents came through. It's being processed and should be in your account by Friday. It's not everything, but it's something. I texted back a thank you, then set the phone aside. Money couldn't replace what was lost, but it would help. Maybe I could use some of it to start a foundation, something to help other elderly victims of financial abuse. Something good from something terrible. As I lay down to sleep, I thought about my parents one last time. I imagined my mother wearing her pearls, my father with his medals pinned to his chest. I imagined them proud of me, proud that I'd fought back, proud that I'd honored their memory by refusing to be erased. Your daughter did good, I whispered into the darkness. I hope you're proud. And somewhere in whatever place exists beyond this one, I believe they were.